The frenzy had tangible consequences. In some neighborhoods, local schools were so overwhelmed they had to add portable classrooms just to keep up. This wasn't just a trickle of retirees. Young professionals, remote tech workers, and families with children all contributed to the population boom. For every family unloading a moving van in Boca Raton, another investor closed on a pre-construction condo in Brickell. This insatiable demand had a predictable effect. Inventory couldn't keep pace. By late 2021, active listings for condos in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties had plummeted to their lowest point in over 15 years. Realtors fielded dozens of offers on a single unit. A two-bedroom condo in Delray Beach could attract 10 buyers in a weekend, most with cash in hand. Cash was king, and bidding wars became the norm, not the exception. The dream of home ownership in the Sunshine State seemed within reach, but the foundation of that dream was becoming dangerously unstable. The state's population topped 22 million for the first time on record. Demographers warned that such rapid growth would strain housing supply and infrastructure, but for the moment, the boom seemed unstoppable. Then, on a muggy Saturday in June 2021, the first, most devastating domino fell. The collapse of Champlain Tower South in Surfside was a horrific tragedy that claimed 98 lives. But beyond the immediate human cost, it sent a shockwave through the Florida real estate market, forcing lawmakers and residents to confront a terrifying reality. The state was filled with thousands of aging condo buildings, many with deferred maintenance and crumbling infrastructure. The Surfside collapse wasn't just a structural failure, it was a regulatory failure that had been decades in the making. In the wake of the disaster, the Florida legislature moved to act. Within a year, they passed Senate Bill 4D, a sweeping piece of legislation that rewrote the rules for high-rise living across the state. The new mandate was clear. Every condo building above 3 stories must undergo a structural milestone inspection by the time it turns 30 years old, with re-inspections every decade thereafter. These reports would be filed with the county and made available to residents. But the most impactful provision was buried in the fine print. For decades, condo associations had been allowed to waive the requirement to fully fund their reserves for future repairs. It was a common practice used to keep monthly HOA fees low and attractive to buyers. It was a way of kicking the can down the road, deferring costs for a later day. Senate Bill 4D ended that. Waivers were no longer an option. The intention was safety. The result was a financial bomb. Suddenly, condo boards across the state had to commission expensive engineering studies to determine the remaining useful life of everything from the roof and plumbing to the concrete and rebar. And then they had to start collecting the money to pay for it, now. The special assessments began rolling in, and the numbers were staggering. The median special assessment landed at a jaw-dropping $45,000 per unit. Some buildings, facing decades of neglected repairs, demanded 6-figure lump sums from each owner. Owners who had bought their homes expecting stable, predictable fees were suddenly facing bills that rivaled a year's salary. In one Fort Lauderdale complex, the board called an emergency meeting after an inspection uncovered spalling concrete and water intrusion. The required repairs topped $6 million. These were not wealthy investors, but retirees on fixed incomes, teachers, nurses, and small business owners. One board member described the grim task of delivering the news as telling your neighbors they've won the world's worst lottery. For thousands, the choice became stark: pay up, sell at a loss, or risk foreclosure. The dream of a Florida condo was rapidly becoming a trap, and the crisis was just beginning. With the new mandates in place and enormous repair bills looming, the second domino was about to fall: the insurance market. 6 major insurance carriers either failed or withdrew from Florida between 2022 and 2025. Companies like United Property and Casualty, a former mainstay for coastal condos, canceled more than 30,000 policies in a single month, just as hurricane season reached its peak. Industry filings with the Florida Office of Insurance Regulation tell the story in black and white. Escalating reinsurance costs, mounting litigation from a notoriously lawsuit-heavy environment, and catastrophic hurricane exposure made the business of insuring Florida condos simply unsustainable for many mid-sized carriers. This exodus left entire buildings scrambling. Some were forced to accept bare-bones coverage with double the premiums and higher deductibles. Others, unable to find any private insurer at all, were pushed into the state's last resort option, Citizens Property Insurance. By the summer of 2025, Citizens was carrying more than 1.1 million active policies, more than double its book from just 18 months earlier. This wasn't a sign of a healthy market, it was the symptom of a market running out of choices. The state's safety net was being stretched to its breaking point. The impact on the real estate market was immediate and severe. The tightening grip of lenders and underwriters wasn't just slowing sales, it was freezing hope for a new generation of homeowners. In buildings with recent structural assessments, deferred maintenance, or even a single insurance claim, the list of willing lenders shrank to almost none. Cash buyers gained the upper hand, but even they hesitated when an association's insurance coverage looked shaky. The result was a market where listings lingered for months, not for lack of interest, but because financing had become a minefield. The final domino was the mortgage market itself. Major lenders like Wells Fargo, Chase, and United Wholesale Mortgage issued new bulletins in 2025. Loans on condos insured only by Citizens would face extra scrutiny, higher down payments, and in many cases, outright rejection. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the giants behind most mortgages, required airtight proof of full replacement cost coverage and strict compliance with the new reserve rules. Any gap, any missing document, and the loan was dead on arrival. Loan officers in Miami-Dade and Broward-Cadell described a shift from rubber stamping to redlining. One veteran broker put it bluntly, "It's not about your credit score anymore, it's about your building's insurance binder." For hundreds of thousands of Florida condo owners, the crisis arrived in their mailbox, disguised in their routine HOA invoice. But the numbers inside were anything but routine. The dream they had bought into just a few years ago was now being crushed under the weight of runaway costs. Consider the monthly budget of a typical family in a two-bedroom condo in Broward County. In 2021, their total payment, mortgage, taxes, insurance, and HOA dues, might have been a manageable $1,400. By mid-2025, that figure had exploded. The principal and interest on their loan remained the same, but now, tacked on, was a monthly HOA fee that had doubled to cover the new legally mandated reserve funds. On top of that came a special assessment, broken into monthly installments, to pay for concrete restoration and a new roof, repairs the association had deferred for years. Then came the insurance bill, which had tripled after their private carrier left the state and they were forced onto a Citizens policy. Suddenly, that $1,400 payment was over $2,100, and in some buildings, much higher. For a family earning the median income, these fees began to swallow almost half of their monthly paycheck. The math simply no longer worked. The fallout was swift and brutal. Foreclosure filings in counties like Volusia surged by 41% year over year, with the once booming city of Deltona becoming the epicenter of the crash. Legal aid clinics reported a tidal wave of calls from frantic owners, retirees, single parents, working families, all facing the same impossible choice. Community Facebook pages, once filled with announcements for pool parties and holiday gatherings, became desperate forums for advice on bankruptcy attorneys and foreclosure hotlines. The human toll was devastating. "This will bankrupt us," whispered a retired school teacher from West Palm Beach, clutching a special assessment notice for $52,000, a sum that represented almost all of her life savings.
She too, like many, had planned to age in place, to live out her years in the sun. Now she was facing eviction from a home she owned. The market, once defined by scarcity, was now drowning in it. In Deltona, the local MLS showed a 14-month supply of condos on the market, more than double what real estate agents consider a balanced market. It was a clear and devastating signal that sellers now outnumbered buyers. But this wasn't just a local story. The ripples of Florida's crisis were already spreading. Lenders in other coastal states, like North Carolina and Texas, began tightening their own rules, suddenly scrutinizing condo associations for the very same issues that had brought Florida to its knees: unfunded reserves and inadequate insurance. They were wary of importing Florida's problems. State housing officials in Arizona began citing Deltona's 32% price drop in committee hearings, a cautionary tale for their own aging condo stock. Back in Florida, the political pressure reached a boiling point.